But before we get started, and we apologize, we're going to keep pulling this up and down because we do need to do an audit of the for-profits and the non-for-profits in the room, as well as what type of social media, your company is utilizing right now. So just so we can frame our presentation for you. So without further ado, why don't we start? So do you work for a company, or are you associated with a company that's a for-profit or non-for-profit? Okay. Do you utilize social media? Okay, so what social media platforms do you utilize? Do you want me to pull this up, Scott, and turn it off?
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
Mainly Facebook right now.
Yeah.
Also use Twitter, Pinterest.
So we have Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest. All right. What about you?
Facebook, Twitter,
Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest. So we got two. Go ahead. And if we could frame this, if it's just, if you're not working for a for-profit or a non-for-profit, then tell us your personal. But it would be best if you could look at it from the perspective of the business that you're working with right now.
I do both nonprofit and my personal. So it's Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Vine, Snapchat.
All right, we got lots more. Vine and Snapchat. Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest. Fantastic. Barb? Personal, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest. Hi.
Hi, I'm actually associated with a nonprofit women's center right now. I actually use all of them
Okay.
for my personal, but more like a Twitter or Twitter and Facebook for the nonprofit.
Twitter and Facebook for the nonprofit.
Okay.
Hi, Jamie.
I run two, let's see, 3 for Facebook, 3 for Twitter, 1 Pinterest, 1 Vine.
Okay.
YouTube, what about YouTube?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
We were waiting for that. There's another one.
Yeah, for YouTube.
Okay.
I also have LinkedIn.
Yeah, fantastic. Because we're going to talk about LinkedIn too.
I was thinking of Instagram. Is that
Yeah, Instagram, social media, the social media engagement on Instagram as well. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so I do for-profit and non-for-profit both. So Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Google+.
There it is.
Fantastic.
A lot of things.
Jeff's like, oh, you took mine. That was my new one. Go ahead, Jeff.
Facebook, Twitter, I've used Pinterest. I've never done any videos for YouTube, but Google+. Oh, and LinkedIn.
For-profit, Facebook, Twitter, Google+, LinkedIn, Instagram. Yeah.
Good. Joe?
For-profit, Facebook, Twitter.
Facebook, Twitter, for-profit. Hi, I can't see your name, but
Oh, Mike.
hi, Mike.
For-profit, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest.
Foursquare.
Foursquare, Google+, and Instagram.
Mike?
For-profit, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Hey, Dad.
Personal, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, and that's it.
I can't see your name. I'm sorry. Kim. Hey, Kim.
Personally, I use Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, YouTube, Foursquare, a little bit of G+, Instagram.
For-profit, Facebook, and Twitter.
Okay. Thanks. Hi.
For-profit, Facebook, and Instagram.
personal, Facebook, and Twitter.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
Nonprofit, Facebook, and Twitter.
Okay. And you? Sorry, I can't read. I have some pretty good vision, but it's getting a little hard for me to read back there. Sorry.
My name is Niraj. It's for-profit. We do Facebook, Twitter, and Reddit, and GitHub.
And I'm sorry, last one I didn't hear you.
GitHub?
Yep, GitHub.
I'm Jesse. For-profit, we do Facebook, Twitter,
LinkedIn, and Reddit and GitHub.
And I'm sorry?
Reddit and GitHub.
Okay. Fantastic. Hi.
John, so as far as on the for-profit side for myself and clients, we have Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, YouTube, Vimeo, which isn't up there, Google Plus, and LinkedIn. And then on the nonprofit side of things, Facebook and Twitter.
Kept up with you.
I'm trying to stump you.
As I'm watching you, I don't know what's going on. Okay. Hi.
Hi. Personal, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Vine, Snapchat, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram and Google+.
What about you?
Nonprofit, Facebook and Twitter.
Hi.
Hi, for profit, I use Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, YouTube, Instagram, and Google+.
And you over there?
Hi.
Hi.
Personal, Facebook, Twitter, and Google+.
Go ahead. Hi.
Hi. Nonprofit, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Vine, YouTube, Foursquare, and Google+.
Hi.
Hi. Well, nonprofit with him, Twitter, Facebook, Vine, and Instagram, and personal projects.
Okay, fantastic. So I do think that when we went around the room, was there, I don't believe there was that one company or one, whether you were a nonprofit or whether you are for-profit or for your personal, I don't think there was anyone that said they didn't use Facebook or Twitter, correct? Was there anyone? And so we can see the power just in this audience alone of Facebook and Twitter. But the question comes into play is how effective is Facebook and Twitter, and how effective are you engaging with your constituencies, your audience, to leverage your message and to ultimately elicit the outcome you want. So today, Scott and I are going to talk about nonprofits and for-profits in the game and how to be more effective. And we're going to present this as a back and forth. We want your opinion as well. So when we talk about social media policy and we talk about social media strategic plans and who's your brand manager and outsourcing and social media listening tools, it's going to be a back and forth because we're faculty members and we don't like to sit up here and talk constantly, nor when I was sitting in an audience did I want someone to talk to me all the time. So we thought more of an active learning type of presentation would be more effective for you. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. So with that being said, there are so many social media platforms that we can utilize. And you saw on the board right there the plethora of social media platforms that we can utilize. The question comes into play is this part of your job? Is this an add-on? Do you solely do this? And so we're going to talk about that from a for-profit and a non-for-profit standpoint as well. So again, we're going to look at social media usage, strategic plans that all of you have crafted. Hopefully you have. And if not, we'll give you some tips on maybe getting started with your social media strategic plan, because if you are engaged in the social media sphere, we have to have some type of plan of where we are and where we're going, and then how do we assess our results? Because if we're just out there throwing stuff out and hoping that it will stick and that we're engaging our constituents, well, that's all well and good, but the question comes into play is how effective is it? So therefore, how are we assessing our effectiveness within the marketplace of connecting with our constituents, our audience, so on and so forth. Some social media policies. Our roles of social media managers, meaning, do you do this for your primary job? Do you work for a nonprofit, as I do, and they say, oh, wow, we don't have any more money, and can you do this in addition to your job already? Which I love those add-ons. Thankfully, I like social media, so it was a win-win-win. Or some of your companies may be engaged in outsourcing your social media activities because you've just found that it's overwhelming and you can't concentrate on what you were hired for, and utilize all those social media platforms that when we went around the room, all of you said you were utilizing. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, both from a for-profit and a non-for-profit standpoint. And so, social media strategic plans. I pulled up a nonprofit for you here, the University of Cincinnati, and I'll get into it in a second. But for those of you who are in nonprofits, how many of you have sat down with those who you work with, and you've crafted a social media strategic plan. So 4 in the audience. So, okay, we might not get anywhere, but talking about social media strategic plans today. And so let's take a step back. How many of your companies have a strategic plan in place?
For-profit, right? We're talking for-profit now?
For-profit, non-for-profit, anyone at this point?
Anyone.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so first and foremost, maybe we should look at, our company has a strategic plan, and then there are various strategic plans based on divisions that flow out of the strategic vision, mission, vision, values of the company. And social media marketing usually flows out of the marketing strategic plan. And so with that being said, we're going to call on all of you today to go back to your companies and say, maybe we should have a dialogue about implementing some type of social media strategic plan, because here's our vision, here's where we're at, and really, do you know where you want to be without a strategic plan? We could say, yeah, we want to get there, but how then do you actually get there if you don't have a plan in place to get there, and then assessing the results? And so I'm going to turn it over to Scott. Maybe he can talk a little bit about right now about the for-profit sector, and then I'll follow up with the nonprofit sector.
Yeah, do you want to get into the
The Tavani, or the?
Yeah.
Sure, go ahead.
I want to run through very quickly here to show you a nice framework for utilizing, to develop a social media policy for your organization. As you can imagine, there is not a lot of literature out there on social media. This particular piece that I'll spend just half of a minute on is from a woman whose name is Shama Haider-Kabani, and she runs a firm called the Marketing Zen Group. And this is from a piece called The Zen of Social Media Marketing. Look, there's just not a lot of good literature out there on social media. A lot of it is theoretical in nature, what it could do for you if you effectively engage in social media. Kabani has this very practical piece on how to make it work. One of the pieces that she comes up with is this piece on social media policies. And I'm just going to jump ahead here and see, Michelle mentioned that there's a heavy concentration here on Facebook, for example, okay, Facebook. And so what happens if you're working with a nonprofit organization or a for-profit organization, and somebody begins to post commentary on any form of social media that might be negative for your brand? That's really how this whole thing starts. With policy and procedure, it usually starts with a problem that forms. All this dialogue that takes place could be harmful to your firm's brand, for-profit or nonprofit. And so, what could that mean from a for-profit perspective? For me, sales, customers, loss of traffic to my website, diminishing our brand, all those things that come along with it. And so, what Kabani says we should do is there's a very simple 10-step framework on social media. Decide where you stand. What is in play? Is it Facebook? Is it Twitter? Is it everything that's up on the board? And how will you engage consumers in dialogue? Social media is magical because it gives us a forum for collaboration and communication. Years ago, when we watched television, some pretty lady or some handsome man on television would say, this is the vacuum cleaner that you'd like to buy. This is the type of car that you should be driving. This is the type of gasoline you should be putting in your car. Nowadays, consumers are much more savvy. They utilize social media for feedback and for dialogue. And so what is your position? Where do you stand? What are the tools that you think you should be using? What constitutes social media? List them. And let's face it, things are changing, right? We talked about YouTube and web video. Somebody mentioned Vimeo as one of the other tools. Kabani says any medium, including video, that allows for communication in the open, dialogue in the open. No one has a crystal ball that works. No one knows what the next big tool is going to be, right? If you did, you would be thinking of it, and you would be millionaires. Maybe. I hope so. Who owns what? From an employee perspective, Is it their content if they post on your platform, or is it the property of the organization? Everyone inside the house should really know who does what and what's in play. Okay, and I am moving very quickly, and I can share this with you afterward if you'd like to get your hands on this as well. Keep confidential information private. This is something that's very important, particularly in for-profits where there could be proprietary information that could jeopardize a brand. Certainly, websites can be hacked. My Twitter account was hacked twice this past year. My passwords are about 15 characters long, random characters and everything, and they still seem to get hacked. Confidential information with your firm needs to be private, and that's the kind of thing that you need to be talking with your team about. These are the things that we don't want discussed. Sales figures, traffic data, how much we're spending on marketing, how much we're not spending, those kinds of things. Michelle mentioned before, who's responsible for social media? In the for-profit world, there's a chance that there's a dedicated body for managing social media. But even in those cases, it's not always possible. So someone needs to be charged with this task so that it's not lingering out in the wind. Who's responsible? Is it HR? Is it communications? Is it somebody that you need to hire? Is it a volunteer if you do have a nonprofit organization? Is it a board member? Could be. You need to decide who that is. Encouraging your team to interact. Why have social media if everyone in your organization is not taking advantage of it, using it to help with your brand? Dictate the rules of engagement. This is where you say, this is what we want to do out there, and this is what we want to accomplish, but don't cross this line. And in very general ways say, don't do anything that's going to be negative, that will have a negative impact on our organization, for profit or nonprofit. Taboo topics, what shouldn't be discussed? For example, for those of us that work in higher ed, we often have the challenge of talking with students who post content in their own social media that shouldn't be posted. It could be someone who's doing a beer bong to, we've had all kinds of crazy things happening with students where they know they shouldn't be doing it, but they post it anyway. Non-private, certainly pornography, legal banned substances. You're talking with your team about the kinds of things that as a team you do not want to see posted. Michelle talked about monitoring the social sphere. Whose job is it to monitor the activity that's taking place in social media? There are a number of good services out there that you could get, some of which are for free. There are many great companies in our community. Some of you might be doing this now that will monitor the chatter and the communication. Monitor it so you can be part of it. Not everyone knows how to use social media. Not everyone knows. So inherently, especially for our team members that are just getting started, a little bit of time needs to be spent with them in training, showing them how to effectively use it. And have a crisis plan. What happens if you have a disgruntled employee and for whatever reason they lose their job and they post on your Facebook page confidential information? Maybe they post a video. We saw the video about the woman who quit her job from a web company not long ago. What if it's 20 times worse than what she did? Queen Latifah had her on her show a few days ago and offered her a job, which is interesting to me. Well, what if somebody that you fired or laid off starts a Facebook hate group about your firm, about your nonprofit? Having a crisis plan in place is pretty important. And the worst part about this is a lot of organizations, because these policies aren't in place, don't have a crisis communications plan in place, and so inaction. Well, we don't know what we're going to do when something happens, so we don't know how to address it. Nor do we know who should be the person that's taking charge of it.
So I'm going to share a couple of instances with you over the past week and one that previously happened. And I wanted to ask you what all of you would have done about the situation. So I work for King's College, and we have many constituencies we like to engage with on our social media platforms. So we have prospective students. We have parents of prospective students. We have current students. We have parents of current students. we have our faculty and staff. We have our alumni, and then we have the larger community. So we have a lot of audiences that we need to tailor content to. And so about 2.5, 3 years, it was more like 3 years ago, we realized that there was a need for us to engage in the social media sphere to talk with all of these individuals that wanted to talk with us. And so myself and another person, we formed this social media committee, and we did, our social media somewhat plan, and we did our policies. And one of the policies was we were going to post content that was not offensive, but it would hopefully engage our constituencies to have a conversation with us, but also with each other. And it could be about a broad topic of things, whether it involved King's College or whether it didn't involve King's College. And so I'm going to give you for instance of what happened and how we quickly retrenched, because we didn't have the foresight to think about this and think what was going on. So A-Rod hits his 600th home run, and so yay for A-Rod. If you're a Yankees fans, great. If you're Phillies fans, okay, maybe you don't like him. So with that being said, there was a post about this, and then all of a sudden, we get a couple of alums, you're a Catholic college, how could you be congratulating someone that has no morals, no ethical values, so on and so forth. And the conversation went ballistic. And then you had other alums and other current students and prospective students engaging in this conversation, and they were divisive and fighting with each other, and it was not productive at all. And so literally by the end of the day, the social media committee convened because I was having a panic attack, and said, oh my God, what are we going to do? There were several of us who had posed, maybe we should just keep the content about Kings, and so we were swayed, let's engage on a broader level to have more conversation. And so we quickly retrenched and said, the committee voted, and it was a unanimous vote that we weren't going to engage in conversation about anything that did not have to do with King's College. And clearly A-Rod hitting his 600th home run did not have anything to do with King's College, except, didn't do it unless we were going to a game, right? And so you clearly see how social media policies and your plan have to be fluid. It has to give you the ability to be able to make decisions on the fly, so that maybe what you're doing is good, and then all of a sudden you realize, ooh, it's not so good, and maybe we have to make a retrenchment and change. And so for those of you who are formulating a strategic plan that will contain your social media policies, you really do need to have fluidity within the plan so that you can change on the fly, right? Because we can't predict what's going to happen. Also for us, we're monitored by the Newman Society, which judges how Catholic you are or how Catholic you aren't. And so we really have to look at the things that we post to make sure. I know I understand that, but we're governed by a charter and a mission, and so there are outside organizations that do that. And you're constantly playing. You're walking this tightrope of, who are you offending? Who are you not offending? Are you doing this right? Are you not doing this right? So on and so forth. So you're all judged in some way, and we are judged, King's College, in some way. And so I'm talking about it from the for-profit way. Now, I'm going to detail a little into this social media plan for the University of Cincinnati, because it is a very, very detailed social media plan. And maybe it can give you some idea of where you need to start. Maybe you don't need to have a social media strategic plan, but for those of you who are thinking that maybe this is a good idea, here's an example. And I don't know why it's not going. There we go. Maybe if I waited a little longer. So again, they did a situation analysis for their social media strategic plan, and so they established various goals of what they wanted to do with their social media and how they engage their constituencies at the University of Cincinnati. The reason why I picked the University of Cincinnati is because for many of you, you may have one very specific focused target audience that you're trying to reach. That's not the case for colleges and universities. They have a very broad constituent base, and so I thought, all right, well, I'm going to bring you a strategic plan that talks about multiple audiences, and so therefore, then you can craft it if you're just specifically focused on one audience. So first and foremost, you have to determine what your goals are for your social media policy. So for this overall strategy, they wanted to build a collaborative university-wide social media environment. They wanted to strengthen the brand and improve the reputation. Very good free way to do this, right? Recruit and retain students, faculty, and staff. I can tell you as someone who used to be the former dean of admissions at a couple of schools, social media platforms are a great way to engage your prospective students, your prospective clients, and so I'm sure all of you would agree with that, or you wouldn't be utilizing those social media platforms, right, for your company if you didn't think that it was effective in some way, shape, or form. Build a culture of philanthropy. Again, they want new students, but they also need money from their alumni, right, for endowments, for scholarships, to bring in some new students. And so we have some King's College alumni in the audience, so don't forget. All right, and establish social media as an official emergency and crisis communication outlet. That's a great way, right? Fantastic. And so I wanted to share this with you so that you can think about a social media strategic plan, and do you really need one at your company? And if you do, who should be at the table helping you make these strategic decisions and defining these goals? I can tell you that it needs to be collaborative in nature, because unless you have buy-in from your organization, and you'll always have those people who say, nah, you don't need that, blah, blah, blah. But you do need to have consensus building when it comes to social media and a social media strategic plan, because if you have different offices that are associated with posting, or if you're in a company that allows multiple divisions to have different Facebook pages or different Twitter accounts, there has to be some type of blanket plan that sort of ties it all together, right? Or we're all out in our social media sphere doing our own thing. And the question then is if we're doing our own thing, are we really working toward the mission of our respective companies, but are we achieving any type of goals with that, okay? So let me get back out of this, go back into PowerPoint. I need to go back a little bit. So, I apologize, how many of you said you had strategic plans at your institution for, okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, about 4 of you. Can you in the back tell me how the process you went through to develop the strategic plan?
Specifically the overall mission of the organization or social media?
Social media, how that flowed out of your strategic plan.
Well, Mandy Boyle's our board chair, so she had a lot to do with it. We're from a visual and performing, we're from the Vintage Theater, we're from a visual and performing arts space in downtown Scranton, so a lot of it came from, because we work with such a wide network of artists, musicians, filmmakers, who are all dependent on social media and marketing and networking in general. I don't want to simplify it because obviously there's so much more I don't know, but it was very much just simply based upon their needs and the needs, so pretty much our clientele base and how they were already engaging people. So through Mandy, we've created kind of a central hub to facilitate their communication, not only in addition to our programming, but extends beyond everything they do. Because even if they're not working with us right now, they are still a member of our extended patron and clientele. So a lot of community engagement.
And I think you said that you had a strategic plan?
Yeah, so I'm a marketing consultant, so I work with companies to help create strategic plans and also like strategy for digital stuff. One of the important things that we used to focus on in terms of putting actually a strategic plan together is obviously looking at the audiences and the demographics you're going after. Not only that, but what are the goals you're trying to accomplish. So I told you I use Vimeo for one of those places. Those videos are entirely private because it's a paid private community. So the point isn't about getting out publicly. We use Vimeo instead of YouTube because they have better publishing tools if you opt in for their paid account. So it comes down to that.
To what works for your respective clients.
Yeah.
Do you want to say something, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, just basically to echo what they were saying. So around this time last year, I worked for a social media management company. We managed, the full gamut of small startups to, large e-commerce sites. So we developed social media strategies around, like Jonathan was saying, around their goals and what their objectives were. And then it was really just a refinement week over week based off analytics and how their community was engaging or not engaging with the content. So it was really, you know, outlining a goal originally, and then just refining that week over week to reach that goal.
I can tell you, when I was doing the research for this presentation, nonprofits love to put their strategic plans out there.
So, yeah, like colleges especially. So you do
Colleges love
you
it.
do like the advanced search for like site:/.edu, and then if you keep in like a .pdf after that, you can sort right there.
Anything. And
Search modifiers.
there's actually a .org that is a central hub for social media plans, or strategic plans, and social media policy. But not so much when it comes to for-profits. Why do you think that's the case? Why are we not sharing our strategic plans when it comes to the for-profits? Go ahead, Mike.
You don't want your competitors to get ahead and know what you're doing.
Right, you're thinking, man, I'm the best. I have first mover advantage. I have a competitive advantage in the marketplace. I'm not giving those other people my tools to beat me out in the marketplace. And so very, very difficult to find I would say poignant and good strategic plans in the for-profit sector. So, all right, so we're going to switch now to Scott. Did you want to add anything on that one?
Just very quickly on the for-profit side, when we're talking about goals and objectives with strategic planning and with social media planning in terms of marketing, goals with quantifiable objectives that can be measured, that are probably the most important elements of any of these plans. And so I'll go back to Vintage Theater's example and Connor, what he just talked about. Goal could be increasing attendance, increasing the brand awareness of the Vintage Theater. But within that, an objective could be to increase ticket sales for each event by 5%, to increase web traffic by 8%. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is come up with metrics that can be measured, where we can benchmark our success. That way we can back out of that to see how effective our social media tools are. You know, going back to where we started, we have a lot of different things up on that board right now. We have a lot of concentration in Facebook and Twitter. But what if perhaps more with video, web video is the place to be from the metric side?
And for engaging your constituencies and telling your brand story. And so we'll talk a little bit about that in a while. So we now, from our strategic plan, we now hopefully develop some social media policies. So what can we do? What can't we do? What should we be posting? What shouldn't we be posting? How many times a week should we be posting? So on and so forth. How many times a day do you think that you should be posting on social media platforms in an effort to engage your constituents or constituencies?
Depends on the platform and the day of the week. Some days perform.
On average, because there is a statistic out there that just is a blanket on average. But you can, if you go into day parting and you go into behavioral and geographic and the different types of targeting approaches, if you start to layer that in, then yes, depending on what your company is. But on average, how many times a day do you think that you should? Scott?
I said 5. The data tells us 5.
The data says 5. And so go ahead.
For one platform? Yeah, which platform is that 5 for?
I would say Twitter 5, maybe Facebook maybe 2. Again, depending on your community size.
It does. It depends on what you're using. The data that we looked at was across social media platforms. So there's a balancing act between way too much and not enough. Could be 5, could be more. I mean, if you have all these platforms that you're using on a daily basis, 5 just doesn't seem like it's reasonable.
But then, when are you inundating your constituents with your message that they are totally tuning you out? And so I ask each of you to go back and think about that, because at some point, it's just like when we see so many ads on TV, or when we switch the radio off, or we don't look at a billboard anymore. That still does happen in social media. And so you need to find out what's right for your respective company. We do pretty much 1 to 2 posts a day on Facebook, usually 2 to 3 on Twitter, LinkedIn every other day, YouTube not as much. So on our social media platforms, We also use a scheduling tool, which you can utilize as well, but it depends, again, who your constituents are. We are, if we have a lot going on, say we have stuff going on for prospective students, we have stuff going on for alumni. So again, and I know I'm using it in the reference of a college or university, but all of you may have different target audiences. You might have 3. And so then your messages might be different for each of those respective target audiences. So you might have 3 or 4 Facebook posts because each of them is a different message for your specific target audience that's contained within all of your likes on Facebook or your followers on Twitter, so on and so forth. So how many of you do have social media policies in play that say you should post this many times, this is the content really you should be focused on, anything of that nature, taboo content? Yes?
More so on content, diversifying content more than anything, making sure that it's not so promotional all the time, because that's a pitfall of a lot of businesses or nonprofits for that matter, where social media and the web has completely changed. This isn't push marketing anymore, you know? And so making sure that obviously providing relevant content that necessarily isn't in your wheelhouse, but it comes build authority, and so recognition for your brand is a thought leader.
I would absolutely positively agree. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I think we go about 3 to 5 times a day, depending on what type of content you have. And then another policy I have, more so, I used to work for a newspaper. Anybody that's working for me, I told them, don't, in your personal social networking, don't mention the competition. Because there's a couple of younger people that work there, and they would post like, oh, we just got this, and, you know, screw those guys, they didn't get it. Or like, well, you just drew attention to them, so maybe someone's going to follow them now, and just post what you have. You know, you can say it's an exclusive or something, but not like, we had someone do that, like, on the other side once, like, oh, we beat you by 5 minutes on tweeting about, like, this thing, and I was like, yay for you, like, just making sure.
And I would agree with you. When you have to when you have to constantly toot your own horn in reference to your competition, then what's wrong with you that you have to mention them and bring their name into whatever you're doing, whether you're selling selling a respective products, you know. If you have to degrade your competition in order to get the sale, then you need to figure out what's wrong with your product or what's wrong with you as a salesperson. Yeah, that comes into a lot of ethical issues with that being said. Go ahead, Scott, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, but what if your client is telling you that they want you to post 10 times a day on Facebook? Or, right?
I was going to say, you can advise them, you know, don't do that, it's not a good practice.
Right. Yeah, and that takes a hard conversation sometimes, right? Those are the people who are paying your bills, or you're doing it pro bono, which happens a lot. But at the end of the day, you're trying to meet the needs of your client, and so you know, having those conversations with your clientele might help prevent you from diluting your brand.
And then what happens if you're within a company, and let's say you have multiple divisions that have their own Facebook page. Do any of you have a situation like this at work? That it's one company, but within that respective company, there are different products and services? Yes? Can you give us, and they have different Facebook, Twitter, so on and so forth?
Yes, I actually work for United Neighborhood Centers, which is a nonprofit, and so there's the organizations page, and then I work in the youth department. So for the youth department, we have our own page because we're putting out a lot of different stuff to kids than they are to community young.
And so how do you manage to work with all these different entities and to keep the content fresh?
I usually post a lot of stuff because I'm with the kids. I post what we're doing, what's happening, pictures and things. But I also try to pay attention to the organization's page, and I'll share things that they put up that I think are relevant for the kids as well.
Mm-hmm. And that's sort of a situation that we're in. So if any of you are working with at your company and you are seeing that there may be a need for different Twitter accounts or Facebook or different YouTube channels, so on and so forth, you may want to consider one repository for all of your social media platforms that your constituents can get to. And maybe that might be providing all those links on your website, so on and so forth. We have a much more complicated situation because we have all of our student groups who want to be linked on our social media hub, and then we have all of our fabulous academic departments who think that they need their own Facebook pages and Twitter accounts, and let's put up some web video. Thanks, Scott. No, he does a great job. And so you then have hundreds of social media platforms that you need to monitor, because we know that if you're not engaging your audience and you're not posting fresh content, that's a bad reflection on the college, right? And so we have policies and procedures that say if you don't do this, 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 and this, we'll take it down, and it won't be linked anymore. And there are rules and of engagement, but there's also rules of how you can use our logo, right? And I'm not going to go off into my copywriting tangent because you don't need to hear that. But anyway, you don't know what they do with your logos, right? Anyway.